Well, soybean harvest has already started in many areas of the country. We haven't started yet on our farm, but we're just about to, and we're talking today a little about some of the things that we're thinking about during soybean harvest, including how to set the combine.
Well, you know, when we talk about the combine, the biggest thing that I see is coming out the back end, the residue. Now, if you're going to spread it kind of like this manure gut spread, you're going to have a terrible time next spring unless you're doing some tillage out there, trying to get your crop coming up even. So let's just say, for example, you're going to plant corn following that soybean crop. Right where you've got that windrow of residue, now you've got a thick mat, maybe it's 2 or 3 inches thick of soybean straw, and you're trying to, first of all, cut through that and place your corn seed. That's going to be difficult. The other thing is just if you do get that corn seed placed, how is it going to come up through all that residue and be able to compete with some corn that's going to be coming up through black soil? It's just impossible. You're going to have a terrible crop.
Well, one of the reasons why some farmers want to windrow that residue is because they're going to bale it up later on. Now, that's fine if you want to do that, but just keep in mind that you're removing what's going to be organic matter in your soil. You're removing nutrients from that field. So if you're baling up those soybean stalks, you want to make sure you're out there spreading manure again soon, just so you don't have an overall depletion in your field.
It gets to be a challenge for guys, especially guys that are feeding cattle. Let's say that you're looking for some wheat straw or some soybean stubble or something like that that you can blend off with your distiller's grains. You know, that's fine. It's fine to have a ration like that. But on a year like this where wheat straw is really expensive, if you're going to buy some soybean residue, you got to look at what your replacement cost is going to be to put that fertilizer back in your field if you're going to sell some of that. And right now you may be able to buy grass hay in some parts of the country cheaper than you can buy the stubble. So why would you get carried away with that? Don't get caught up in what your ration has been for the past few years. Look at the value of that. As fertility prices go up, the value of that residue being left in the field is huge. So you may have to switch to some alternative source of your feeding cattle.
One of the things I always like to talk about when it comes to setting the combine is how many pods are going to be left in that combine tank. All I'm trying to say here is we talk to a lot of soybean seed producers, and we want to make sure that we're not damaging those soybeans or cracking them up excessively. So all I tell guys is don't run it through the returns so many times that you get every last pod out of there. I don't mind when there are a few pods left in that grain tank. It's not the end of the world. Certainly it could be a potential problem if your beans are wet and you're trying to store them and run air through them, but most of the time we're just not all that concerned about that side of things. What we're more concerned about is cracking up those beans. You can get docked if you have excessive cracks, if you have excessive fines, so just be real careful with that. And especially if it is seed production, you want to make sure that you have nice looking seed when you're all done, not all cracked up. That's not something that the seed company you're selling those beans to is going to be real happy with.
Well, the other thing, Brian, is exports. I mean, you think about it, if you're cracking up seed on your farm, think of how many times that has to get handled before it ends up in China or some other country that may be buying our soybean exports. All of a sudden they get this beat up, ground up soybean and they think, wow, those American farmers, they just aren't doing their job. You know, we need to have good quality product that we're going to export. And a lot of times, you know, we don't think about that because, yeah, when you dump it at the elevator, you get paid and you think, well, the story's over. It really isn't. You have to have a good quality product that goes all the way through if we want to keep that value of our soybeans up.
Well, one of the most important things if you want to have that good seed quality is making sure that you're combining at the right moisture. And with soybeans, it's really challenging, especially where we farm in kind of a drier area of the country. Beans can go from 13% moisture down to 8% moisture in just a few days. So that's why on our farm, we've always had what I would consider an excessive amount of combines for the few acres that we farm because our dad was so worried.
That's your excuse for your addiction to iron, I see, Brian.
Well, let's just put it this way. I want you to think about this for just a second on your own farm. If you can harvest your beans at 13% moisture instead of 8% moisture, you've in effect now got 5% more beans. Even more than that depending on how you figure shrink. So if, let's say, like on our farm last year, we raised 60 bushel soybeans, and if beans are worth $13 a bushel, they're worth more if we're raising them for seed. I mean, that is a tremendous amount of money. You're talking close to $800 an acre. Well, if I lose 5% of that, that's $40 an acre. $40 an acre. I can afford to have another combine. And that's where I'm going with this whole thing. You've got to make sure that on your farm, you're out there starting when the beans are even slightly above 13%. We often tell guys, start when the beans are 15% moisture, because a lot of times during the day, they'll drop from 15 to 12. You want to get out there and get as many beans as you can harvested around that 13% moisture area instead of around the 8%, because it's just too much lost income for you on the farm.
Well, 15 may be pushing it just a little bit, Brian. 14 may be a little more advanced. advisable.
By the time it gets to 13 and then you drive your combine 8 miles away to go harvest the field, it's just not worth it. I mean, now you've dropped another point or two of moisture, depending on what the day's like.
Well, just some good sunshine out there can definitely drop that moisture percentage fast. So this is one of the things that we talk to guys about, especially seed producers, that, you know, those stalks may not be that easy to cut, but it may be time for you to get out there. So don't worry about, well, I want it to be nice and easy to cut through everything. Sometimes it might smell a little bit like silage coming out the back of the combine if you want to get out there when the beans are at the right moisture percentage for you to maximize your income. When we talk about 40 bucks an acre, you know, if you said, hey, I'll give you 40 extra dollars an acre to go out there when the stalks may be just a little bit green, but the beans are perfect, would you take an extra 40 bucks an acre? Absolutely.
So once again, if you're harvesting soybeans on your farm, keep in mind what the moisture percentage is, take a look at the residue that's coming out behind the combine, and just do everything you can to have good seed quality, whether you're a seed producer or not, because don't forget that a lot of soybeans in the United States do get exported, and we want to have good quality beans that are going for export, so it helps our overall market in the future.
Well, if you're planning on putting some soybeans in a field like this, you may want to control our Weed of the Week this fall. We'll explain coming up later in the show.